So welcome to day 13 of the Explorathon, and today um, we're going to have another family member of mine, Ishan Kanoi. He's a cousin of mine who I only met probably in his 23rd or 24th year of his life. Until then, I'd only known he existed. I hadn't met him. But just to give you a quick brief, Ishan works with Cummins. He has done his education in finance at Purdue University. He's grown up in Calcutta, and he's played golf in his younger days. He's played golf at the national and international circuit. And when I got to know Ishan, it was for me what really struck me about him was he would sleep at 9 or latest by 9:30, come what may. And every day he would wake up at 5. And to me, it was really interesting to meet a 22-year-old at that time who had that kind of discipline. And I think he continues that discipline to this day. It probably came in during his golfing days. Ishan is going to talk to us about risk because that's what he does at Cummins. He travels all around the world to different Cummins facilities, and he interacts with their teams and helps them to understand what are the risks in their setups and their processes, and helps them how to plan their business continuity better. So they have something called business continuity planning. So Ishan is going to talk to us a little bit about risk. And you might think when we speak about risk is about business or risk is about entrepreneurship. But I think life itself is risk. Everything and every day is a risk. A baby being born is risk, and living is a risk. I could step out and it's a risk. And right now we are in times which are, who could have predicted even 2 months back that we would be living in times like this? So I think every day we are faced with multiple risks, whether it is expressing an opinion, whether it is trying out something new, whether it's committing to a project, whether it is, entering into a relationship, trusting someone, the biggest risk of all. And I believe that there are only two types of risks in our life. It's the risk of doing and it's the risk of not doing. Typically, we tend to assume that the risk of not doing is greater than the risk of doing is greater than the risk of not doing. But I think that's something today's session is going to make us question. What is greater, the risk of doing something or the risk of not doing? And then how do we manage those risks? So with that, I'm going to welcome Ishan and ask him to take over from here.
Okay, hello everybody. Thanks Aditya man for setting the context and that introduction. So like I said, I'll just go ahead and start presenting my screen. Let me know if you guys can see it here in a minute.
Yep, we can see it.
Presentation mode.
Okay. Yes, we can see it.
All right, so welcome everyone. In case you lost track of days, today is a Monday morning, but I will not bore you with audit jargon and what I do at work and audit and all of that stuff. But like Aditya said, it's going to be more about what, the kind of risks that you have every day and how we go about it. So I'll just start off by talking to you guys about really what is risk and just some high level definition. There might be some technical jargon, but I'll try to jump through that and get into more of the fun and interesting stuff which all will relate to more and more. But essentially risk is just the chance or probability or possibility of something going wrong, which can cause injury, loss, damage, and so on and so forth. But in spite of all that, we do go ahead and accept certain risk and take certain action. Now, there are ways in which we try to mitigate this risk and manage this risk, and I'll talk more about that. But what I want you guys to really understand is that there is an element of inherent risk in our everyday life. So like Aditya mentioned, right, like giving birth or even going out there, crossing the street, driving a car, there is an inherent risk of having an accident, of something going wrong, something not working as per plan. So really it's about, you can't really avoid it, but what you can do is mitigate it or reduce it to the best extent possible. So I just found this really cute comic on Pinterest actually sometime where, Christmas comes around and the kids in the UK and US kind of send out these notes and write letters. Of course, they do imagine that Santa does exist, but he really doesn't. We all know that. Come on. So, but yeah, the elder sibling just goes ahead and says, let's just drop in a note to mom and dad as well. Because at the end of the day, as much as Santa doesn't exist, you do want the gift. So this is just one of those things where you kind of cut your losses, where you just say that at least my message is getting across. So even though Santa doesn't exist, I win. It's a win-win situation. So it's just something cute I came across. Um, but moving on, so again, I don't want to get into, this is not about the stock market, about the Modi government, about Trump and how foolish he is, and China and trade relations. I'm going to keep it very simple. So if I start going off track, please unmute your phone and stop me. But as much as Aditya said that, we have only two types of risk that exist, but once you go one step into those two steps of risk, there are these other elements of risk which exist. So of course there's economic risk. This doesn't require much explanation, but this is more around, like markets and trade relations and things which countries have, which we have. Things go up and down, agriculture, crop produce, manufacturing companies, tech companies, so on and so forth. So this is more financial. This has more of an economic impact. But again, I'll come back to this a little later, but all of these are interconnected. So like, even if we pick something like social risk, right? Where you could have a public health issue, you could have labor unrest, or like, these unions getting together and causing issues. So you do tend to read and see about that in the news. So that's really what this is. I'll skip over here to natural risk. So this is more on natural calamities, disasters, which we have, hurricanes, earthquakes, so on and so forth. Because all of this really causes disruption. And there is, again, like I said, like the definition of risk also says, there's loss, there's injury, there's damage in some form, and to more people than you'd imagine. Political, again, this is more around, just having some political unrest or some socio-economic causes which also tie into these issues. But really, how our country is. It's very bureaucratic, more like a banana republic. So this tends to exist more in our country than in others. And then last but not the least is tech risk. I think this is something which is you can't even call it an emerging risk anymore. It has emerged and become the leading risk today. If just a silly example, if I have to pick, if somebody has your property papers, it's not that big a deal because that's just one property of yours he can access or meddle with. But if he has your identity, that guy can pretty much take you to the cleaners today. I mean, that's the kind of tech risk you're carrying in terms of data privacy, identity theft, and so on and so forth. So with that, I'll actually jump to the next slide here, and I want to open it up a little here and just real quick. So having said that, and I want you all to think that risk is not just limited to social risk, economic risk, natural risk, and so it's far more far-reaching. So I want you guys to just unmute your lines if you don't mind, and start throwing some things out there before I go ahead and populate this slide with some basic everyday risks which we all encounter. Or you can throw it in the chat box, however you're comfortable. But feel free.
The risk that my internet connection might just die.
Say that again. What do you say?
The risk of me losing my internet connection in the middle of a session.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone else? Just feel free.
Me getting coronavirus.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll go ahead. So, just these are some very basic things. Okay, now we'll start talking about impact and risk perception of all these things, but these are just some risks. So as you read through these, right, like if you're going into a job interview, you don't get that job, or you are dating someone, or you're married, your spouse or partner happens to leave you, or your internet is not working. I mean, this is like a colossal risk today. I mean, can you imagine being at home on a lockdown without any internet? It sounds more like a worry, but this is actually a risk today. It can affect businesses, relations. It's far reaching is what I'm trying to say. I'll skip this next one about house keys because I want to spend some time on it just to illustrate something. And then, like I think Nidhi mentioned, around coronavirus lingering on for longer than we'd like and expect. Riding a bike without a helmet, that's a health and safety risk, as you know. And then again, something like what Aditya mentioned, that what if I can't share my screen, my presentation is not popping up, or does it mean you stop doing this? You just got to kind of have a backup plan or think through it as you prepare for this. So we'll talk more about this in the later slides, but just to illustrate, so have you guys ever thought of what the repercussions could be of forgetting your keys? Now, I'm going to make this a little more exaggerated in terms of you forgetting your keys, you leave the house to go to a party or to college or to work, and your parents are traveling and no one's at home. Have you ever thought about how you are going to mitigate this risk or reduce this risk, right? So are you going to leave the keys with your neighbors? Do you trust them? Are you going to slip it under that carpet or that little plant you have outside the house? So you see how many things you open yourself up to. So even though you try to mitigate the risk by leaving it with the neighbor, you open up another kind of risk by leaving it with the neighbor itself. So really, I mean, it's like a catch-22. How do you go about this? Like, what do you do here? So in later slides, like I said, we'll talk more about how you can actually mitigate and take care of this risk. But at the same time, some people sitting on this call are probably thinking, you know what, that's really not a risk for me because there's always someone at home. I have elderly parents, I have domestic help, I live in a dormitory, or I live in community housing where I don't have that risk. So that's exactly what this slide is about. So this is actually about quantifying and perceiving risk to everyone, how it appears, and it actually is different. So I'm going to take a really stupid example. Um, does anyone on the call happen to know what are the odds of you getting injured by a toilet? Like just throw a number. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. It's like you have 100,000 chances of getting injured in a toilet. But now let's flip that situation. You hear of n number of stories every day, if not every month, or from time to time, where you have elderly people at home who have accidents in the toilet. Now, it's very unfair to quantify all of that risk as one in 100,000. It changes with demographics, with age groups. We have domestic health. We have almost 83, 84% of our population living in spaces which you can't even imagine. Can you imagine the risk of getting injured in a toilet like that? There's so many people using it. There's so much stuff going on there. It's just, so what I'm trying to say is where you fall in this risk matrix is very different. Now, to tie it back to something I do at work, like even what I said on the first slide, if Cummins happens to lose data, so if we happen to lose some engineering designs, which are like prototypes, or we lose customer data, it even though we might lose one design on this matrix, if I have to plot it on an X and Y axis to get a little technical, the likelihood of occurrence might be very, very low. It might be close to 0 by 0, as close to the origin. But if it even happens once, the impact is so far reaching, it can mar us and absolutely throw us off completely. Like we will be in the newspapers for all the wrong reasons. We're going to lose customers, we're going to lose revenue, goodwill, so on and so forth. Whereas if I just take something which we do every day, a mundane task like processing an invoice or releasing a purchase order to a supplier, there's some delays there, there's some errors there. If you know what, if I'm processing 700-800 invoices a day and even 20 or 100 of them are a little delayed and maybe 5 or 7 have errors, I can live with that risk and kind of work around it. But I absolutely cannot have us or the company lose any data, any critical, confidential, restricted confidential data. The impact is that much more far reaching. So that's just something I wanted to bring out, like how risk is not the same for everyone's. Everyone's risk appetite is also not the same. So that's why I wanted to just spend some time on this slide here. But now that you've all understood a little bit about risk, so I just want to help you all also address or make like a POA of how you can go ahead and start hashing this out. So again, as you would imagine, like there would be a different impact and how it's going to affect somebody is going to be different. So you've got to assess for yourself, for your situation, what the effect really is. Then you kind of get into what's causing all this? Like, so why are you forgetting your keys so often? Why are you not wanting to wear a helmet and ride a bike? Why are you not, you're like going in for job interviews but not being able to convert? So you start getting into those kind of things, and then you start charting out what you can do to address those root causes. So you really want to get to the bottom of it. So this requires some work and thought thinking. So you analyze, assess, and then you go ahead and come up with some recommended actions, and then put that into practice and run another iteration. It's not, it doesn't, it sounds a lot easier than it is, but you got to go through that grind a little. But I think the first step here is about really identifying the problem, and then getting into root causing, looking for answers, recommendations, reaching out to people, and then putting it into work. And then again, you got to go through this is really what it's about. Just you keep going through it time after time. So with that, I'll actually come to the next slide, which is something that has helped me a lot, and it works in various disciplines of life, right? So planning, I think, is step one in terms of mitigating risk. Um, so there's this concept of 6 P's of planning, right? So prior planning and preparation prevents poor performance. Now, I'm going to jump to the next slide just for a second here. So this is going to scare a lot of you, but this is a yardage book. Okay. So like Aditya mentioned, I grew up playing golf. So when I was playing competitive golf, this is a book which is given to you when you're playing at a golf course. So every golf course gives you a book. So everything that you see, which is in ink and hard coded, that is given to you by the golf course or that authority. And then everything else that is in colored ink and written up and, kind of highlighted and things like that is what the player and the caddy put together. So before a golf tournament is typically 4 days, yeah, and the day before that is the practice round. So you spend that whole day walking the golf course and charting all of this out. So all your yardages. I won't get into too much technical stuff, but the page on top and the image on the left actually has. So this is from a golf course in Coimbatore, I remember, where from 2013 to 2018, I knew exactly how the wind was blowing, which way the grass was growing, what clubs I hit to which pin location, and how the green sloped, and so on and so forth, where the sun was in the morning and where the sun was in the afternoon. Because that is really what is going to help you get that score and that number you want. I know this is very technical and confusing, but what I'm really trying to show you here is that you got to put in that prep work. It's all about planning. It's all about going ahead and really understanding what are you dealing with. It's not just out there and you wing it. It doesn't always work like that. So again, coming back to this slide. So again, checklists are something which work really well, right? I mean, so the reason why McDonald's and Starbucks is there in terms of the symbols is how often do you guys crave, I don't know, like a peppermint hot chocolate or a Big Mac in at some point in time, and no matter which part of the world you're in, a Big Mac tastes the same. Uh, a latte at Starbucks tastes the same. Now, trust me, the reason they can do this is because they plan a lot. I mean, that goes without saying, but it's checklist and discipline which really brings them to that. So it doesn't stop there. It's not just that it's repeatable and sustainable, but think of the risk that they're mitigating. You don't have customer dissatisfaction. It has no impact on your revenue. In fact, if anything, it has a positive impact on revenue because you have people coming back every single time. You create brand loyalty because everyone is going to advocate that. You could be a vegetarian in a remote place in China. If you don't get food and you like having a mocha frappuccino, you can walk into a Starbucks there and fill yourself. It's not, it just is a given. You don't have to worry about that. That is, can you imagine the kind of risk which a company is mitigating for itself and for an individual? It's something to really think about how repeatable, sustainable, and far-reaching this whole process of just having checklists and planning helps them with. It's all across the world. And again, like I said, so put in that legwork, do all the hard work. It pays off in more ways than one. Even at work, if you're doing projects with Aditya or at school or college, or if you have just made fancy slides but not spent time going through it, you have really wasted all your time, because there's going to be that one leader or one person in management who's going to ask you a pinpointed question. Okay, it could be something you presented 3 months back. It could be something he was involved a week back. But if you don't know what all of that data was built up upon, you're going to struggle. So put in that work, I would say. There's this really famous quote. I don't know how many of y'all have come across it, but it really stuck with me, where it basically says those who sweat more in practice actually bleed less and more. So when you're put to test, it doesn't impact you that much because you've put the work in, you've got all that going for you. So you've just got to go ahead and implement it. And I can tell you, this is not a surprise. You walk up to any athlete, could be Usain Bolt, Jack Nicklaus, Sachin. They don't go and make centuries. They don't run a 9.5 800-meter dash on the day of the Olympics. They do this many nights and days before showing up to the London Olympics or the Tokyo Olympics. That day is just another day for them to go ahead and do everything they've been doing for years at a stretch. It's very easy for us to say, oh, um, that guy won a shooting competition, Bolt did it again, but that guy did it every day for many years. That was just a social event for him where he had to do it yet again. So just preparing, and I would say this is something even Aditya harps about a lot, where create an ambience of where you're going to be competing similar to what it's going to be in real life. So if you're going to take a test, try to take it at a time when that test is actually scheduled for. If it's a test which starts at 2 in the afternoon, try to plan your study day like that. Try to isolate yourself, try to eat according to that. So it's just another day for you to go ahead and just execute. You don't spend all that time like, oh my God, what happened now? How do I deal with this? So, and there's no free lunches, okay, guys. You got to put in that work. Don't expect that, because Aditya and I wake up early in the morning. If you're up at 5 o'clock in the morning before a job interview, it's not going to do any magic for you, because you don't do that every day. If anything, it's going to backfire on you. So you got to really build that into a routine and discipline more than anything. So with that little rigmarole, I'll move to more fun things here and give you all more real life situations. So this is again some risk and technical jargon, but I wanted to understand this in terms of what the reality is of certain risks are. So I'll take coronavirus as an example to explain this terminology to you. Now, all of us know that the cases are rising every day. We don't have a cure. But really, what is the government and what are we all trying to do as people? So I think there's enough data out there which tells you that there is a level of acceptance which we all have, that at some point in the next 2 to 3 years, if you don't know, you are probably going to get the virus, right? Now, okay, the odds of you getting dengue in Pune might be higher than you getting coronavirus, believe it or not, but that could change and you got to accept that. So what do you really do? So that's the first part, is about accepting a certain risk. Then what are we really doing as a government and as a country to avoid all this risk? It's really very simple. Factories are shut down, offices are shut down, public places are shut down. What we are really doing here is avoiding the risk altogether. We have accepted a certain level of risk. Having said that, we are avoiding risk to the best possible case. How long is this sustainable is something to think about. That's what the Modi government is spending the last 3 weeks really doing, believe it or not. So they need to come up with a solution where you find that balance between life and livelihood. And it is not a joke. 135 crore or 1.3 billion of us is a mammoth task, but we're doing certain things. Now, coming to risk reduction, staying at home, putting on personal protective equipment or PPE, wearing masks, social distancing, these are just, again, further measures on reducing the impact that risk could have altogether. And finally, risk sharing is something as simple as having health insurance, getting ventilators, getting doctors on board, reaching out to medical personnel, reaching out to countries which have infrastructure to support you. So you share the risk with vendors, third parties, other countries, uh, competent personnel who can support you in such times, right? And that's what we're seeing, where we have China sending in ventilators, Germany helping, we get funding from the IMF or the World Bank, things like that. So you reach out and share and spread the risk. So everyone's got some skin in the game, and there's a need and a reason to support. So, having said that, then now none of this was to scare you or to make it morbid. At the same time, this is the most important slide. All of you guys know who said this, but this is actually what it's about. You've got to go out there and put yourself on the line, okay? Because there's another saying where a ship at shore is actually not worth anything, because that's not what a ship is meant for. It's supposed to be out there and ride the waves. So go out there, guys, and do what you got to do. Having said that, now I want to move to this next slide around risk and reward. So this is more about finding the right balance and the sweet spot. But here is a personal example of where I really put my life at risk. My wife was not very happy about this, but I still went ahead and did it. Now, scuba diving on National Geographic looks a lot more fun than it really is. Okay, so guys, can you see that cute little turtle I'm next to? That looks cute right now, but when I was in Brazil doing this dive, there's an element of scuba diving where you have to go 20 meters underwater and demonstrate that you can take all that equipment which is on me, just excluding your wetsuit, completely off, lose it, including your mask. You don't have oxygen supply, you can't see anything, and you have the tank to deal with, your BCD, all of that off, including your flippers, and you got to put it back on. Now, I go 20 meters underwater in a little island in Brazil called Ilha Bela, and I plant my knees on the ground to go ahead and demonstrate everything. So I'm stripping all this weight off me, the BCD, the cylinder, the mask, and I cannot see anything. And guess what I was sitting on? I was on a sand bed with this little turtle under me, and it happened to flap right then. I had no oxygen supply. I could not see, I don't think, 6 inches beyond vision. And I had to grab all of this and put it back on. And there was sand all around me and in my mouth. Guys, it was not a fun experience by any means. It was not easy. Going up is not an option from 20 meters below the surface of the earth, because you will die even you even start going up 2 meters. Okay, it's not even an option. But I still tried it in spite of knowing I can't. I was pulled down by this guy, and he said, "Dude, you got to do what you got to do." Now, put everything back on, got my mask back on, got my regulator back on, which is your breathing supply. And the first thing I do is throw up straight into that. What does that do is that delays my oxygen supply for a few more seconds because it's choked with sand. But there's a one-way filtration, so all the sand filtered out, is only after which I got oxygen. Now, 20 minutes, 30 minutes passed. Only then is when you see this cute little turtle and me floating around it like a fun image. But at no point was this turtle any fun for me while I had to do all of this. But if you ask me to do this all over again, yes, I would. I mean, I go diving at least once every year, and it is absolutely awesome fun. There is 75% of the earth is water, so you can only imagine how much more beautiful it is below than what you see above, which is just 25%. So trust me, everyone who goes to get certified does not have this experience, but it was absolutely life-changing, and I enjoyed it, and I would do it all over again. But it's something I wanted to share from a risk and reward standpoint, that you do take certain risks, but it's fun. I mean, it's part of the drill. It prepared me for a time when and if it ever occurs. I hope not, but if it does, then so be it. But it was really cool fun. Um, but moving on here, then, guys, don't get too stressed about it. Okay, this is not, it's just a risk assessment. It's not about, figuring a whole life out, chalking everything out. As you can see, this guy is just working in a lab. He's an engineer, but he's got a construction helmet on. He's got sound cut off ear stuff on, knee pads, a pillow tied to him. It's unnecessary. He works in a lab. I mean, all he really needs is safety goggles and safety shoes. He'll be good to go. But just don't overkill is really what it's about. This is just a funny slide I found on it. But so moving on, I'll just end on this note here. This is more about a magic recipe, right? I mean, there's no rocket science to this. Even when times are good, it comes in your life. Just think about it. It's just something to assess, right? And one size doesn't fit all. In the same example, like I explained to you in that matrix. So if you're going out and doing a project, I'm going to imagine you're going to do all that work. you're gonna run a dry run in your mind, a simulation of how it's gonna look like, it's gonna work out. Like it could be doing a project, it could be, I know somebody mentioned learning Python, it could be preparing a dish, it could be picking up a guitar. But you go ahead and do that work. You pick up groceries, you reach out to people, you look at videos, you do the legwork, right? And that's really to just make sure you're equipped to do what you want to do. And in audit parlance, what this is really called is risk appetite, where you really assess how much you can kind of, how much risk you're willing to take. So you got to first assess that before getting into the planning. The key thing here is, I think this is something again Aditya mentioned, where you really got to have take that plunge, gather some confidence, guys. It's okay. It's really not the end of the world. You got to take the plunge, take a jab at it, and take it with a pinch of salt. So as you read through this comic, I hope you guys can still see my screen. So it's just these two guys planning the project, everything plans out, and then guess what? Reality kicks in, and it's always going to be, or well, excuse me, more often than not going to be different than what you simulated or what you imagined. So you know what? It's absolutely fine. Just take a deep breath, reassess. You can't figure everything out at once. I mean, there's no fun. You don't learn anything from a success story. Where you really learn is from your failures. So just go ahead, try again, gather yourself, and move on. It's not the end of the world. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think you've all heard that song, and there is a lot of truth in that. So just kind of remember that and chug along. And I think in the end, this is something I'd like to leave you all with, where live outside your comfort zone, go ahead and take risks, have fun, live it up. And one of the things I think we want to, Aditya and I wanted to leave you with, I think I'll let Aditya jump in here, is where we want you to think of a risk which you have been thinking of taking or wanting to take for a while, but just haven't been able to gather yourself. You've not had the tools in terms of, where you're thinking of so many what is going wrong and what are the possible scenarios and the impacts and the causes. But now you have somewhat of a level of understanding of how to go about it. So just try to think through it in that rubric, and then maybe we can start throwing some things on the chat box, or even feel free to unmute your line and start talking, and we can make it an interactive session. But I'll just throw a very simple example here to get you guys thinking again. But like, we all travel with friends, family. I mean, just think about it. If you're going abroad, I don't know how many of you buy travel insurance when you're traveling. I'm just curious to know. I mean, I don't know how many of y'all have thought about this. So this is not because I'm trying to say that something's going to happen to you or something could go wrong. We are all going to go have a great time, spend time with family, see a new place, eat good food, make memories. But it's just something as simple as that. Just think about the risk of not having that. You could have an injury, you could go hiking with friends, you could be swimming, it could be anything. You could just fall sick. You're gonna, you Do you really wanna be in a situation or in a foreign country without any insurance or cover, and you know how quickly those medical bills rack up? So it's just something to get you guys, it's just something to get the thoughts going. So just think about it in terms of certain ideas you guys have. I'll stop sharing my screen here and get into the chat box. And Ditya, I'll let you unmute your phone now and take over. But thanks a lot, guys. This was a lot of fun. And I know there were some more ideas on spreadsheets and PowerPoints. My wife and I do that all the while, and she'll be more than happy to help you guys with that. And trust me, it looks a lot more fun than it is. Excel can be very irritating, but it is a boom. But if you all want to do that, we'll be more than happy to help. And thanks, Aditya, for this time. I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys get something out of this. And I've enjoyed all these sessions with y'all, and y'all are full of cool and fun ideas. So, and I did mention to Aditya that if I get a pay cut and I have to work 4 days a week, you can be rest assured that on the 5th day of the week, I will be at Let's Enterprise. So I look forward to working with you all, and thanks a lot for this.
Thanks a lot, Ishan. You took a topic that is big and scary, and you made it quite relatable for all of us. The challenge that I want to leave everyone with is just think about what is it that we can do to contribute, to teach, to make a difference in these days. And we might be toying around with the idea, but haven't taken that plunge. It'll be wonderful to have a dialogue on the group about a little risk that all of us think that we can take and how one would manage that risk. So with that, thank you so much for being here on day 13 of the Explorathon. Tomorrow is going to be the 14th and the final day of the series of 14 skills. We have a beautiful musical performance planned tomorrow for all of us. So we'll have a tight session from 12 to 12:30 tomorrow. And then we have one of our friends, Valentine Shipley, who is a renowned guitarist and musician. He is known as the Urban Fakir, who's going to be doing a live program for all of us from 12:35 till about 12:55, 20 minutes or so. So be there. Feel free to invite anyone you would like to. And let's have a wonderful final day of the 14 days of the Explorathon. And then based on the ideas that you've shared, we'll see what we can do to take this forward. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye.